Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Van Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Uh-huh. So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
If you're a fan of comic books and comic book conventions, Daytona Beach Comic Con needs to be on your list of must-attend events. It's a show that actually focuses on comic books. Imagine that! This year's event is happening on Saturday, September the 6th, and Sunday, September the 7th. Silverline creators will be there, so we'll see you at the show. There's a new convention in town, and it's sure to be mega fun without the mega expense. Comics, toys, collectibles, pop culture. ShadowCon, Saturday, February 1st, 2025 in Orlando, Florida. Silverline creators will be there, so we'll see you at the show. If you find yourself in the Orlando area, and let's be honest, doesn't everyone come to Orlando for the House of Mouse? Head over to Coliseum of Comics to get your comic book fix. Be sure to check out their location on East Colonial Drive, where they carry a wide selection of independent comics, including Silverline books. Stop by and don't forget to tell them Silverline sent you. Hey, if you're an independent comic creator looking to get your comic printed, look no further than Kablam Digital Printing. They print our comics and do a fantastic job. They can even print special edition covers. When you reach out to them, be sure to tell them Silverline sent you.
Hi, this is Tim TK, host of That Silverline Show on Tuesday. Join us at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Tuesday night as we discuss pop culture and the joys of making comics.
Hi, I'm Barb Kelber, co-host of Silverline's Wednesday Wham. Join us each Wednesday nights as we discuss comics, literature, movies, and anything else that may catch our attention.
I'm Roland Mann, and I host Silverline's Silver Sunday. Join me every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern as we make mine Silverline.
Hello, Internet. How are you? We are That Silverline Show on Tuesday. I'm Jose Fuentes, and wrong way. And I'm joined with Ron Fortier. I know, right?
Howdy, of course. Down there is Dave Rio.
How you doing?
All right. So hey.
All right.
Tim's not with us, right? Tim is
at
a party. All right. I mean, hey, save some cake for us, okay, Tim, please.
You mean he didn't fall down the well? Timmy didn't fall down the well?
No.
Lassie's looking for him, so.
Lassie hasn't told us yet.
and of course, he leaves us with this phenomenal topic of the week, right? Which is, how does it read? How to write a sword fight?
Right, the perfect sword fight.
The perfect sword fight. I mean, okay. I mean, I read that title. I went, you guys. I mean, are we really reaching the bottom of the barrel here, guys? Because I mean, how many of us are writing Zorro comics right now? Is this really vital? How to write the perfect? I mean. We can do this in 5 minutes, easily enough, okay? If you're writing a sword fight...
5 minutes for us is like 20, right? You know that?
No, but bear with me, because you guys are the artists here, all right? I mean, my writing a sword fight scene is absolutely no different than me writing a gun battle scene, okay? Basically, the only difference is with a gun, you can be, 30 yards away and take out your enemy, all right? With a sword fight, though, no, he's right there in your face. i.e., it's a visual thing more than it is a literary thing in what we write. Okay, if you're writing a sword fight scene or a gunfight scene, you're still trying to get the action. You're trying to get the flow of the scene, the moving. It's exactly pretty much the same thing. The difference, like I say, is how you guys conceptualize it, how you draw it, how you color it, and whatever, because your combatants are pretty much face to face, a piece of steel away from the other guy. And that's the intimacy of a sword fight, and that's what you're about. And, hey, yeah, I've read Zorro comics, the Barbarian comics with, the broadswords and all that stuff. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I was curious
Yeah,
to
go ahead, Dave,
find
go
out. So I was just curious to find out, if you were presented with, doing a sword, a sword fight scene, would you still write it similar to a gunfight, or would you maybe put more details on, position maybe, or things like that, when you're writing it?
Right. No, you're right. That's the logic. I just walked right into that. That's the truth. Again, it's the intimacy of the scene itself. Because if you're going to have two bodies that are within arm's length of each other, then the action has to take place, and you're much, much more aware of the surroundings. Because again, think back on all those, romantic films you saw as a kid growing up. All right. I mean, basically, it's you're knocking over furniture, or you're Errol Flynn and Basil Rathbone fighting up a stairwell, back and forth, going up and down the stairwell and stuff like that. So totally, the background
chandelier.
Really crucial. It's another element in the fight scene itself, because you definitely want to give the characters some obstacles for them to work around, to move around, to make it exciting. It's not like they're on a flat plane out in the backyard and there's nothing there. It's just the two of them, post, repost, and all this good stuff. All right. And hey, I'm not going to fault the fact if you took, fencing in college, more power to you. You have some idea of what this is. I have a couple of writer friends who studied fencing and literally got into doing, theater special effects, stunt work. For Shakespeare plays and whatever, where there's a lot of sort of fighting that goes on, whatever. And these guys know the real stuff. They know how to do it. So, yeah, you're right. Good point, Dave. The background becomes a lot more important and crucial to how you write the scenes.
Another thing that I was kind of thinking about, too, and it wasn't planned. This was as you were discussing, and of course, initially you were talking about, your Conan, your broadsword, the difference between, stuff like that. But one of the first things that did pop into my head originally was Errol Flynn and that classic fight on the stairwell. I mean, that's pretty, that's pretty iconic. But just now, when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about something else, and what started to pop in my head was thinking about Grendel and Hunter Rose. And you look at the character, and the character was a master at fencing. Right, he did a lot of competitions, and he swept it. I mean, he was renowned. But what was interesting was that, his choice as a villain was not a foil or a sword, but it was a fork. So he used a lot of his techniques and things that he learned in fencing to use a fork weapon. So expanding on that is, there's a lot of things that you can do based out of just your standard, here's your, Sinbad, sword fight or anything like that. And, you can expand a lot of that, and we can talk about that later, a bit later if you want to, is elements like, things like, some of the Asian sword fights where you have swords that are on chains, and projectiles and the use of a lot of those type of weapons where it is a form of sword play. So in designing a scene, artistically and a written scene, there's a lot of things that you can put in to change it up and set a tone, like the Asian sword fights, the big broadsword for Conan, all that stuff. So there's a lot of things that you can kind of expand on other than just your typical, standard sword fight that you're used to. So
Well, I would agree. I mean, totally. If you stop and think about the whole concept of history and the history of arms, okay, most cultures had some form of a sword of some kind, okay, and again, you're talking about Asian cultures, all right, and the katana and samurai, all right, and I can remember early issues of Lone Wolf and Cub when First Comic brought that over to this country, all right, and seeing a lot of samurai movies, in conjunction with that, and that whole concept of sword fighting with a katana as opposed to what would be happening, say, in France with something like an Alexander Dumas' Three Musketeers and their kinds of swords and whatever. So yeah, all the various cultures have had some kind of an extension of the arm, which is what any kind of a sword is. It's basically inventing in your mind how I can take out my opponent with a long blade, you know what I'm saying? And they've developed around the culture itself. A lot of Japanese sword fighting is more than it's almost ritualistic in its approach as well. And when you learn martial arts, you learn those kind of things like bow fighting and whatever. So, but let's keep in that thought in mind, because again, I'm thinking of comics I've seen growing up as a kid, and I'm glad you mentioned Grendel. The majority, like I said, the majority of stuff, it's rare you see swords that much. You get the odd character, whatever. And Marvel had some villain named the Swordsman or whatever. That fought, the Avengers and the X-Men and whatever.
Yeah, he's in the current Daredevil series and was in the Hawkeye series.
There you go.
Swordmaster, I believe, is Swordsman.
Yep.
But yeah, he's yep.
So Jose, drawing that, what's the challenge of drawing a sword fight?
To me, it depends on the weapon you're using and where the character's training is. Like, I mean, I think that plays into it because you're going to get, if one person, let's say a person, I don't know, uses like the Egyptian khopesh, right, versus samurai sword. Their fighting styles are going to be different, right? One might be a little more heavy, a little more grueling. The other one a little more finesse. Like just, for me, you just take that into consideration. I like the idea of like the movie King Arthur with Clive Owen and whatnot. Every one of the knights, the King Arthur's knights, all had a different fighting style. You know what I mean? And that's the folks. It was supposed to be a fighting style from the area that they were taken from. You know what I mean? That was the understanding. And I like the idea of incorporating that into comics. I mean, I think the language can be a little drawn out if you want to show like every move, every position, you know what I mean, every slash and stroke, and like you said, pose or repose, every deflect, every parry. It starts to get a little long. So it's the equivalent of like a very heavy monologue, narration in a comic. So you want to streamline it. You want to hit the key moves, key points. I think like anime does it really well. I know there's a lot of like, I personally don't like anime, but I can respect that when they do show sword fights or whatever, and like Bleach and stuff like that. There's a lot of movement, and you can use that camera angle, for what I mean, in the same respect in comics.
I mean, we're talking about this, and I mean, you can push this. I mean, beyond. I remember the first time I saw the original Star Wars, and guys whip out these laser swords, and it's like, whoa, okay. And you've got to know, Lucas was definitely influenced by Japanese katanas and that kind of sword fighting, because it's right there. Whoever choreographed that fight, especially the fight with Alec Guinness, Obi-Wan, and Darth Vader at the end. I mean, that's all choreographed to what would have been, a monumental conflict in a samurai battle with katanas. All right, it's right there. It's easy to see. So yeah, I mean, it's influenced. My thing is, and like I said, the reason I made a wry face on hearing about the topic is we really do not see that much of that anymore, especially in comics today. I mean, we've already bemoaned the fact that there weren't a lot of Westerns. Things like, again, sword play, knights in armor, the Three Musketeers, and those kind of things. There's very, very little of that, at least in Western comics. Now, again, maybe in Japan, you probably see it a lot more based on their history and their culture. But I'm racking my brains now trying to think of a modern day comic today that is influenced or has a great deal of sword play in it, and I'm not coming up with anything that jumps out at me right away, unless it's again that stretch of it's science fiction and we're using some kind of a laser sword or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the real sword play is going to be technical. I mean, if you've ever watched the Olympics and these kind of things, all right. Number one, they're so fast. All right. I mean, basically, I mean, it's like you blink your eyes and somebody's already, struck a point. The buzzer goes off and boom, whatever. And I'm sure you guys understand when they started making films and doing this kind of stuff in Hollywood movies, they literally had to slow them up. And that's why this whole choreograph came with actually showing the moves. Because if you were using real fencing, it's a blink of an eye and, boom, boom, boom. And I think that's to me the fun of the reason I enjoy Japanese fights, whereas you see these two guys coming at each other, swords held high, right? And they just go past each other and you don't even see the move except one guy at the other end collapses, all right? And that's like, okay, that's a little bit more realistic, all right? But Hollywood had to say, no, we have to slow this down, all right? And of course, you guys have probably already know this or not, but one of the actual fencing masters who was in films was the guy who played the villains, and that was Basil Rathbone. And people don't know that Rathbone actually knew how to fence, so that in the films he played against Errol Flynn, Flynn was the novice and had to take a lot of training from the sword master there. But basically, it was a case of working with Rathbone so Rathbone wouldn't hurt him and make him look good, even to the point where he does Mark of Zorro with Tyrone Powers. And again, he's the villain, but he's the real guy. I mean, he could have taken Powers and Flynn anytime he wanted to, all right? But he has to tone it back down and let these guys win because they're the good guys, So there you go.
Yeah, and another thing is, like you kind of touched upon, is there's also that bit of history and I had the word just a minute ago and I just lost it, but that authenticity of the styles. So if you were going more for a traditional, maybe a traditional, traditional Japanese fight, there's you would write that in. You may turn around and write that and show that as the main characters don't even draw their blade until they strike. And then as soon as they're done,
Yep.
It's back in.
It goes back in.
Yep.
The idea of the guy running down with the sword out, chasing the villain, you don't ever see that. You typically see they're holding on to, the outer case with the sword while they're running through the bamboo, fields and whatever, trying to catch up. And then it's not until they get within striking distance that it's out and they make their pass. Now, whether they hit or don't hit is a different thing, and whether the fight changes. But there's a lot of things that you can do, and in addition to that, you've got a lot of the things like the history of the blades. A lot of the best blades were, they were handcrafted and all that. So there's a lot of tradition and history in that. So there's a lot of things that you can put in if you're designing a series around that of, where does it get to that final scene, what's the build up, what's the history, so-and-so goes and attacks while the main person is out gathering wood or something like that, and they steal the family sword, and you get the build up of getting that sword back and getting it back in his hands, and then the antagonist is dead, and all that. So there's a lot of things that can be played, and leading up to the fight scene, and then of course doing the fight scene. And as Jose had talked about before, is you want to get a good balance where you're showing just enough, but you're not just dragging it out for 10 pages just to fill pages.
Right.
I
mean, don't get me wrong. We all love fight scenes.
Have either of you seen the? I'm trying to remember what streaming service it was on. I don't know if it was Netflix or whatever. This is like a year ago. There was an anime series called Blue Eyed Samurai.
Yes.
I did not.
What did you think about that? I loved it, Jose. I thought it was absolutely fantastic.
I thought it, like, in regards to the fight scene, some of the story stuff, meh, but like the overall story and story arc and whatnot, I thought was fantastic. And then going into the individual fight scenes when the
we lost your sound. Lost your sound, Jose. We can't hear you.
That was really weird.
Welcome back.
There it was. Gremlins on the show tonight. All right.
I think Gremlins are real. So
I
thought it was done really well.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping there's going to be a second season. I'm looking forward to it. If there, it's nice to see good animation wherever it comes from.
Right, and like I said, I'm not a big fan of anime. But that kind of I was like, you know what, that looks pretty interesting. I'll check it out.
The animation was beautiful.
But what I do like is there is a series of movies. I think there's 4 of them. But they're based off an anime, and the movie are called Rurouni Kenshin. And the live action, the sword fights between the different people with different types of swords. It's an Asian movie. Just played off really well, and the dynamic of the camera moving as the main guy Kenshin was kind of half running at an angle on the ground, and when not sliding, the camera was moving with him. Eventually I have where I'm working on stuff for obsoletes, and they have swords in it. One of the characters has a sword in it. I kind of want to incorporate something to that effect, like the very extreme angle poses and whatnot into it. And I said before, I'm a traditionalist kind of guy when it comes to my paneling, but eventually I'm going to throw something in there just to challenge myself to see if I can give that same feel, that same motion in a panel.
Yeah, well, we're talking about this kind of stuff, and it reminded me because I had suggested to the 2 of you after we, hopefully covered this topic to some degree well enough to discuss other things that we were doing for Silverline and whatever. But ironically, one of the things that I brought up and shared with with you guys was a couple pages from the new issue of Beyond the Stars, the science fiction series I'm doing with the Italian artist Andrea Bermuda. So there is a sword connection with that particular project, in and of the fact that what attracted me to this whole series was a few, like 3 or 4 pages that Andrea had done. And in those pages, 2 characters dressed up on an alien planet. I mean, one character shows up in a spaceship, lands on this planet. There are ruins, and she's wearing like Greek armor and has a scabbard of swords, not so much, but like a sword handle. And she gets attacked going through the ruins by a male figure, and again, the same kind of Greek armor, only he's wielding a laser sword, but Andrea wanted to make the laser look like a real sword. So it's shaped like a sword. It's not just a long, beam that Lucas is using as whatever, right? And so they go at it with these 2 laser swords. And I love those pages so much. It's what eventually led me to write to Andrea, find out who he was, to get involved, and then to learn that he really had no story with this. So I jumped in and developed the characters further, developed the plot, put it together, passed it through him. He liked it. And here we are. And now my one goal was we used his pages. We incorporated his pages at the end of issue number 1. This is a 6-issue miniseries as it is. And we incorporated those 5 pages as the cliffhanger for number 5. So we got that sword fight in there. I needed to see that in print. It's so beautiful. All right, you go beyond that, and we come up with the villain, the challenge of the piece, what the good guys are fighting and what have you, whatever. And it then becomes a struggle for me as a writer to get us back to that kind of action, because I absolutely love those few couple pages where they're using those laser swords, and I wanted to get back to that. It would take me another 4 issues basically to get to issue number 5, which is basically an all-action issue. Trust me, all right? And smack dab in the middle of it, starting the second half, I get 2 of the same 2 characters involved with fighting these alien beings that attack them and whip out those laser swords. And if Pop's listening and, covering us right now, he can put up those pages from Beyond the Stars. And there we go.
There you go.
All right. And see the top upper left panel, those 2 pages of this fight scene going on, is Ermat, the science warrior. All right. And he's unaware that this alien creature's come up behind him. The creature's like about 9 or 10 feet tall, and it's just going to, crush him, supposedly. Takes a swing at him. He basically flips out of the way, gets up on his feet, and whips out his sword. And we get to the next page, and he's got that sword out, and that's it. He's starting to, whip it around and use it to defend himself. So, ironically enough, yeah, we're talking about swords play, and this is an alien science fiction type of, sword play. And I love, again, when I write, and we've talked about this before, I just basically describe the panel and let Andrea do his thing as far as composition, layouts of the page, and whatever. And trust me, this is just the beginning of this sequence. I think it goes on almost for five pages totally. So there's another 3 pages where Elias, his wife, shows up, and she's the other warrior with the other sword, and she ends up joining the fight because there's like 3 or 4 of these 10-foot tall guardian creatures that are attacking them. So there you go, alien fight scene with swords, laser swords.
Mm-hmm.
Those are Andrea's roughs.
Yeah, that's it. Those are roughs, very much so.
Those are some pretty clean roughs for being roughs. I hate to have to show my roughs. Gosh.
Oh yeah, he just whips these things out. It's a blast.
I know, it's so good.
Oh yeah, totally.
Mine, you definitely know where the panels are, and then after that, you might recognize a figure somewhere. But I know how it's laid out. So when I take that and I'll light box my, my good clean paper onto there, like obviously the figures come out way better, but yeah, that's way cleaner than my roughs.
Anyways, fingers crossed we can get that thing wrapped up by the end of summer, and hopefully get a campaign going and get issue number 5 out. Which hallelujah means that's it. We have one left to go to wrap it all up.
One more.
Yeah.
Issue 5. That's the next one being worked on. You said that's when the cat or the stuff hits the fan and starts to get crazy.
Yeah, as you write these kind of things, I always knew I wanted to get back to that kind of action because, again, that's what inspired me to get involved with this whole project. But again, doing science fiction, you wanted to come up with a threat that was worthy of your protagonist, right? And any kind of good storytelling you do, any kind of story, all right? Your hero is only as good as how bad the villains are, how bad the challenge are. And in this particular case, we came up with this concept of this cloud that comes out of deep space that's just basically destroying every galaxy it comes across. It just devours planets, just sucks them all up and destroys everything involved with it. And they're almost at a loss of how they're going to survive, what's going to happen when this cloud reaches colonized planets of this empire. And, part of the plot, I mean, again, we've got 4 issues out now, is they literally discover an archaeologist who basically says, billions of years ago, there was an alien race that actually dealt with this kind of a threat before and somehow or other defeated it. And so they have to find out how this, ancient world and people figured out how to destroy this death cloud. And that's a lot of crux of where we're going with the story, the characters, the science warriors that are recruited to find the answer to all this. And by the end of issue 4, all that's happened. They found the weapon that was used originally. They found a way to reactivate it, and that's what leads to 5 and 6. And trust me, 5 from page 1 to page 22 is all action. It's nonstop. So we get issue number 6, and this is a climatic big issue that pretty much wraps everything up. And knock on wood, I was having so much fun with that. I wanted some space to have a little bit of a couple pages epilogue in that work. And Pops, go right ahead and put that page up, because that's another project that I have been involved with Silverline, and have hopefully we're going to see issue 1 of this out before the end of the year. And this is called Chivalry Incorporated. All right. And this is one of those projects I've had in my files for 35 years now. And over that time, I've had, 3 or 4 different artists come along and do sketches, sample pages or whatever. And then for one reason or another, just couldn't stick with the project. So you just put it back in file 13, if you will.
Right.
Right. So as we're getting ready to wrap up Beyond the Stars, Roland turns around one day and sends me an email and says, "So you got anything else you can give me?" And believe it or not, Roland and I had talked about Chivalry all those years ago. And I brought it up. And I said, Chivalry's still in the files. And I was stunned. I was stunned that he even remembered it. He goes, "That's about the private eye, right, who ends up with telepathy." I go, "Bingo, you got it." So, I mean, the tagline with her is "She knows what you did," okay? But anyways, working with Roland, we went and found an old friend of mine who also lives in Florida, Javier Lugo, the artist.
Javier.
And Javier and I had done a 16-page vampire comic.
Uh-oh.
Now he's having me, or do we lose Ron?
We lost Ron.
Oh, okay. Whew. I had to stay still for a minute. I was like, is that me?
Well, I thought you lost you too. So
carry the show, Dave. You got this. What is my favorite sword fight? Let's see. In regards to movies, probably as I mentioned before, the movie King Arthur with Clive Owens. What's his name? Mickelson plays Tristan, and Tristan is one of my favorite characters in there. And his his logic of fighting, the way he went about it was as little attacks as necessary to finish the fight, right? So you would see him with his sword down, and then as the his enemy came at him, you know what I mean? It was like block, attack, done. That guy's dead. Um, and when he tried that on the main bad guy, in the movie, it didn't work so well for him. But his fights are probably my favorite, just because of how simple, like very little movement, very like high effectiveness. So
Well, one of my favorites as far as movie goes is I really like the fights that they had in the movie Excalibur, the old
like the
old
old
movie,
Excalibur one,
old Excalibur, because it
nice.
was like brutal.
Yeah,
It was like you felt in those fights the weight of the armor and how it restricted, and
yep.
how. So I really did like that aspect of it. As far as anime goes, one of my favorites is an old anime from I believe it's the 90s, mid 90s. It's Ninja Scroll,
Ninja Scroll,
and
the stone guy with the double sword.
yeah. So I liked a lot of the fight scenes there, and you had the main protagonist who he was outclassed. Yeah, exactly, the stone guy with the the big sword that he double-sided sword that he threw and all that stuff. Because at any point if that connected, it was instant.
Dude, oh
But he
man,
got through, and and he came in with his his skill and all that stuff to bypass that. So from an
right?
anime, um, old dirty Patty. Oh my God, I've seen Excalibur 75 times. Um, yeah, it's
I
so
mean,
those were a couple.
it's a yearly watch, like for some old school gamers like me. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Growing up, we used to watch that and then play some like weekend long D&D games.
Yeah, and then you turn around and see the actors that are in there. Like a young Helen Mirren.
Right?
You know,
Also, like one of our classics that we watch here at my house, every New Year's Eve. It was a tradition that my best friend started, and then we would do it together as we grew up. Is to watch Ice Pirates, like an
okay.
old like B Robert Urich movie. And in the end, there's like because it's like a sci-fi pirate kind of thing. They're in space trying to take water from like the corporation that is holding all the water hostage, and they're sword fighting through this ice and through this time loop that's like is accelerating time. And so like the whole time they're like sword fighting, they're getting old and their facial hair is growing. They got these long beards and big old afros or whatnot. It's fantastic.
So, but yeah, it's like with a lot of the sword fights nowadays, most of that stuff is you find that mostly in the manga stuff rather than the
Yeah.
the traditional comic. But there's always some cool things here and there that they
Well,
go
they always
through.
incorporate a sword into like, I mean, because you have swords all over Marvel, you have swords all over DC, right? Wonder Woman started
Mhm.
carrying a sword was after New 52. Um,
Well,
but
that's a big
Deadpool,
thing of absolute Wonder Woman is that big, huge sword.
yeah, yeah, she has that big, like that big, was it a cloud sword,
Clue.
like
Yeah, it's like a
from Final Fantasy.
Final Fantasy. Yep.
But yeah, one of the things that was on Tim's notes is also like, when doing your perfect sword fight, you want something that's it might not seem like an important detail, but everyone having, characters, if your characters are going to have swords, there should be something, special about not the powers or whatever, but the look of it, right? So like Conan sword, I mean, if you've ever seen the old Arnold Schwarzenegger Conan movies, like I can draw his sword right now, and I've not seen them in 10 years. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
they're old. Like I think they came out in the 80s. Um, but I can literally draw his sword, his like you know what I mean, like
Mhm.
because it's so memorable. You know, Excalibur, depending on which movie you go by, you can draw Excalibur. You know what it looks like. If there's a silhouette of someone holding the sword, you know what that sword is by looking at it. You know, the gun sword from Final Fantasy, you know what I mean? You know what that looks like if you saw a silhouette of it. You know what I mean? The bleach sword, you know what I mean? What's his
Don't
name?
forget don't forget the Sword of Omens,
Sword of Omens, right? I'm just
Thundercats.
saying, like you,
You could
in
definitely
regards
tell
to
a silhouette
classic,
on
like
that.
classic stuff, He-Man, you know He-Man sword, He-Man Skeletor
Hmm.
sword.
Big
Like
X
I
or the
could draw those
big.
in like a minute. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
got the big, yeah. So I mean, you definitely want something that's going to be, if the focus is your character using a sword all the time, then it might behoove you to, design it where, it's going to be something memorable. People are going to see it and recognize it. You know what I mean? Once they get into your series, once they get into your story, you know what I mean? They're going to be able to recognize it outside of your story, you know? And it doesn't have to be like super intricate in detail with like all kinds of weird stuff all over it. It could be honestly just as simple as Excalibur with that, very simple cross guard on it. Musketeer swords, like Ron had mentioned earlier, those were rapiers. You know what I mean? They had the D guard on it. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
almost all of the French rapiers and whatnot back in the day, either had the simple D guard, like just a big old shield, or they had something intricate. And when it came to movies and whatnot, almost every protagonist had a fancy D guard on their rapier.
Well, one of the things I was a little disappointed because they gave us a tiny taste of it, which was nice, was it the ebony sword from that was in the Eternals, at
Yes,
the final cutscene on that, where it was, talking to the Black Knight and all this stuff. So, it's
the
another.
Evan sword, I think something like that, right?
Yeah, yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
100% sure. But yeah, they kind of played it and they teased it, and we'll probably never ever see it. um,
And that's sad because I saw that. Now, one of my arguments to people when they're like, "Oh, Eternals did terrible," but I'm like, for those of us that know the Eternal characters, you know what I mean, that know, backgrounds of the characters, it actually wasn't that bad. And there was some pretty cool, like, surprise twist in it. You know what I mean, where Druid wasn't the main bad guy.
mhm,
Like, you know what I mean? He was almost always the bad guy in the comic books and whatnot. From my memory.
mhm.
Yeah, like to see that come up, see them bring out the Black Knight blade, and I was like, oh man, are they gonna bring him into MCU? Because that would be awesome. And
Another
yeah,
thing that
we'll
I'm a
see it.
little I'm a little bummed about too is I'm hoping they reverse decision and do follow through with the blade, the Marshall Ali blade, because when I think of Blade, that's a huge thing for sword work. I mean, Wesley Snipes did a
Right.
fantastic job with the sword play in there. So yeah, I'd like to see some of that. So and of course, when that stuff hits, the you start seeing the books that come out because hey, Blade's hot right now. Let's bring back some of the ones. I know that they've been doing Blade with a lot of the Blood series that's been going on. The
Yeah.
vampire series,
Blood
Bloodlust.
Hunters, Blood Hunters, something like that.
Yeah,
Bloodlust, Blood Hunters. It's where like Marvel's version of vampires, where the
yeah.
vampire. I think the sun went out, and so it's like constantly dark out.
Hmm. So I'd like to see some of that. That's some good potential for some sword play and stuff like that in comics. So with
Right.
that with
Well, I
that
think they use
character.
that as I believe they use that as a jumping point to bring in Blade's daughter, as one of the protagonists in his stories
Hmm.
too.
Yep.
I haven't read them all. I have some of them. I like the Union Jack story part of that. I thought that was pretty cool.
Hmm.
But but yeah, I mean, uh, like I said, recognizable blades. You know what I mean? And if you're going to use technique, use research the technique you're going to use. I have a friend. My friend Nick wrote. He's a comic book writer. He's also a police officer, which is pretty cool. But comic book writer, and he wrote a story um, that is focused on an island tribe getting attacked by an army of other people. But the tribe was a little more primitive. The army was not, and the girl, the main protagonist, female, who's defending her village and whatnot. She is using it's Indonesian martial arts, and so it's like using the eskrima sticks and stuff like that. And he was very adamant when he wrote it that all the moves that like they portray from panel to panel of her fighting be accurate to the moves and whatnot that are used in that particular martial arts style because he trained in that martial arts style. You know what I mean? So he definitely like as far as I understand from what if I recall what he told me correctly, he had taken pictures of himself in the poses and whatnot and then sent those off for reference.
Yeah, that's very common.
Right.
But yeah, it's one of the things that we really didn't talk too much about was getting the authenticity down. Um, you
Yeah.
know, you can just throw a sword in somebody's hand, and you may have let's think of somebody throwing a hand or a sword in the Rock's hand in Jungle Cruise. Oh, you're just stumbling
Right.
through a fight type thing. Um, but for a writer and for an artist, if you really want to play that, it's going through and really researching real blades, real fighting techniques, and things like that to really boost and make your comics that much more authentic and draw in, and you are drawing the crowds of people that are familiar with those fighting styles. It's just like, oh yeah, no, that's right, that's spot on. Um, so there's a lot of fun and things you can do with that. But I also wanted to mention you had talked about a panel layout and your traditional, you like your 5-6 panel layout and all
I
that.
do.
But then you're like, okay, well, it could be something fun. A visual thing that popped in my head was a split panel that like two panels, but in front has the maybe it's a samurai thing, but has the sword coming up at an angle and the sword being
Okay.
diagonal, and now you're using that foreground to split two different panels. So that could be kind of a really cool visual for incorporating that foreground background split of panels that brings in your
Right.
non-traditional 5-6 panel thing. So there's a lot of cool stuff. Welcome back.
Ron's back.
I apologize, gentlemen. Seems like we lost a circuit breaker in the cellar.
uh,
The house went dark.
That must have been fun
Oh,
stumbling
it was
in.
fun. Take the flashlight, go down there, looking around, trying to find which one was gone, which one was out, getting it back up here, booting everything off. I
right.
apologize. Really sorry about that,
Oh,
guys.
it's all good. It's understandable.
Didn't mean to leave you all in the lurch. I'm sure you're like, geez, what happened? A new kit Ron or something?
Okay, so when that happened with you, evidently I was just sitting still, and Dave was like, "Oh gosh, did they both lag out?"
Is it me?
I mean, I honestly, I'm just sitting here and everything went black, totally black.
Oh man.
Right. So I got to feel my way out of my office. Then my wife's coming out of the bedroom and she's got a candle or she had a flashlight or something. So head for the cellar. And,
Right.
modern technology, it's so great. Anyways, I'm sure you guys held down the fort real well.
Oh yeah, we just talked about more, sword fighting, different things, scenes. A question was asked, what is it? What's our favorite sword fight? Like, and we gave reference to the movies that we like to see them in. So, but yeah, just
Yeah. Oh, I mean,
everybody.
to me, I mean, I grew up as a huge fan of Errol Flynn. All right. I mean, he's still one of my favorite actors. And I mean, he was the original, swashbuckler, right? And we talked earlier about the great fight between him and Ratbone in Robin Hood. But the one I always got a kick out of was, I'm trying to remember what he did. He did another one called the What was it? Yeah, the Seawolf, I believe. And in that, he's fighting. He's fighting with somebody. He's fighting with somebody in a huge castle, and they set it up so that as they're fighting, they go off camera. And you probably remember the scene because it's classic. They filmed it so they had the lights behind the cameras facing them, and as they go off camera, their shadows are up on this huge pillar on the wall, and there's two giant shadows sword fighting back and forth across the wall. It's one of the most classic scenes in a sword fighting thing, but it's definitely another one of my favorite sword fights. But again, I think the Robin Hood one's the classic one above all the others by far.
So that shadow sword fight that was parodied in Robin Hood Men in Tights with oh man, I forgot his name. The guy who played in Princess Bride.
Cary Ellis.
Cary Ellis, thank you. But they parodied that. They did the pan where like they went off stage or off camera, and the shadows were fighting, and they're over there like getting a drink and taking a bite of a sandwich and whatnot.
The other bit that I always got a kick out of when they used to do these things, not so much when they were using swords, but when they were using actual what we call épées, the long thin blade, right? And he'd be fighting with Ratbone in Mark of Zorro, right? And Ratbone, like in the middle of the fight, turns around. There's a candle burning there, and Ratbone goes right, and he goes like real quick, right? And you look, and he picks up the top of the candle, like he sliced it through without knocking it over, right? At which point Zorro turns around to the other candle and goes swish, swish, right? And basically takes out the center section of the candle. It's like, oh, now we're showing off, guys. It's like,
right.
Oh, and then you get a wonder too. Okay, it's like even as a kid, you watch these things going on, right? And when the bad guy finally gets it, right, the guy like skewers him, in the heart with the sword. It's whatever. It's like, man. Ouch. Okay, I don't know why I'd much rather get shot than taken out with a sword. Think of, remember Braveheart with Mel Gibson? Yep. I mean, that one film I think showed more than any other I've ever seen dealing with medieval, warfare and that kind of stuff. Yep. The battle sequences they purposely made so chaotic. It was insane. I mean, the camera was right in the thick of things, and people like knocking each over. You don't know if you're hitting your own friend or the enemy, and you're just cutting and slashing with axes and swords and whatever, anybody or anything that's around you. All right, it was like how these guys even made it through that. I have absolutely no clue, but it was pure chaos and had to be terror. I mean,
right? Absolutely. I feel that in Braveheart, it was definitely like it. I think they portrayed that really well. The chaos of like the all-out warfare, the all-out battle, and whatnot. There was no like fancy sword play between sword fight between characters. It was just onslaught.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you're just basically hacking away, hoping you'll survive the day.
Well, the other thing that's scary is, thinking about the times and everything. It's like, okay, well, you survive the hacking, and what do you have to look forward to? All of the potential, the disease and just
Right.
the no, the
Infection
medications aren't there.
and
Yes, you have, even if you make it, you're gonna have a rough time.
Oh,
right.
So,
yeah. I just the question that just popped up, and it made me think of something. Apparently, Alex Toth did the Three Musketeers series or drawings or whatever. There's an animated series showing the fencing position breakdowns. And I don't remember Todd so much for Three Musketeers as much as I do for his Zorro work. All right. I mean, Todd was an amazing, gifted artist. All right.
Right.
And his Zorro was some of the best Zorro comics ever done. And obviously, according to what this person is letting us know, is that he actually knew fencing techniques, the whole idea of parry and riposte and whatever. And it's so evident in his Zorro films when you watch the Zorro comics and you watch that. I didn't know he'd done a Three Musketeers comic though, and I'm probably going to have to start looking for that at cons sometime.
Right.
Because I mean, this guy was to action sequences what Bernard Hogarth would have been to anatomy when he did his Tarzan stuff. All right. I mean, these old pro artists were the masters of this. And I mean, they were classically trained. They knew what they were drawing. They knew anatomy. They knew how figures stood in action sequences, moving back and forth and whatever. So it's like, again, like we've talked here, many, many times, they did their homework. They knew what they were doing, what they were drawing.
Yep. And we did talk a little bit about that while you were off. We talked about, the authenticity and how that people pick up on that, and it enriches it even more. So rather than clumsy guy picks up something and just hacks away with it, no skill whatsoever. Unless you're making a comedy,
Oh, there you go. All right. Anything.
All right. So I've not seen that. I'm gonna have to find it.
We're coming close to the end of the hour, and any final thoughts on swordplay in comics?
Well, like I said, like Dave said, actually, authenticity matters. It just like any other scene that you draw, you create, you make. The reader is going to fall into the story a lot more if you're doing a particular sword fighting style and they know it. You know what I mean? If they can relate to it, then you know what I mean. It's going to draw the reader in that much better, that much more. It's going to be a lot more clean, and just, I mean, it just tells a better story when you do your research.
I mean, yeah. I mean, if I'm thinking about this now, and my own final thoughts on this are sword fighting, and we call sword fighting, but then even fencing. All right, when done correctly, properly, or whatever. And again, going back to samurais and battling katanas, it's pretty much a dance. All right, and the more you learn how to do it properly, you're just as great. The ones who do it the best are graceful at it, like dancing. Okay, they know what balance is. They know how to center themselves. They know what to do, how to reach, how to handle the blade. All right. And when you see people fencing properly, it's a beautiful thing to watch.
Yeah. So even like those that like more brutal fighting styles, it's still what I mean, like you said, it's still a dance. It's still movement. It may look different. You know what I mean? It may look more choppy, but the reactions and whatnot are still the same. You know what I mean? You still have to evade and attack. It's just like you said. I mean, I just reiterate, it's a dance, just like you said.
Yeah, and it's also, knowing and working with your subject. I mean, if you're subject is you're writing. Okay, let's maybe a Gru type, some kind of a comedic thing, then you're pretty much going to be wasting your time putting a lot of technique and a lot of that stuff. You're just wasting your time.
Of course.
So, on the flip side, the last thing you want to do is, if you're really going for authenticity in the storyline, is to have a bumbled, a fight scene that just doesn't do it. So it's a lot of properly matching with what your goal is, which is pretty much with everything, whether it be a fight scene, a gun, a shootout scene, a chase scene or whatever. It's always, matching up and making sure that what you do aligns with what, your intent on the story is. And by following that, you come out with a more enriching story, and a more enriching story tends to draw more followers, and
yeah. I mean, hey, look, comics are supposed to be entertainment above all else.
That's right.
Okay, that's the main goal, regardless of what the genre is or what kind of story you're telling is. All right, and the more authentic and the more you put yourself into it. All right, the more you give it your all as a writer, as an artist, as a letterer, as a colorist. All right, to make a good comic book. All right, then what you're basically going to do is be giving a whole lot of people some fun. Okay, you're really going to be giving them some entertainment and hopefully some joy and satisfaction for a few minutes, in a world that sometimes doesn't have way enough of that stuff. So, hey, we're all, you, me, Tim, all of us are in the business of making people smile, laugh, and enjoy.
Yep. Alrighty. All right. Well, as Tim would say, this has been that Silverline show on Tuesday. Make sure you check out our Wednesday show at 9:00 Eastern time, and our Sunday show at 8:00 Eastern time. Yeah, and we will be back next week with a subject that Tim will share with us later.
Hopefully,
I'm pretty sure it's all in a timeline, but
for the whole hour next time.
Hey, any of us actually, other than Tim and them, have access to view what they are. But we'll find out. We'll have something.
Hey, look, if anybody watching this show has any ideas for a topic, send them on in, please. We'd like to hear, what you'd like us to talk about, by all means. All right.
Absolutely.
Jose, what do you say?
All right. I say, as we say every Tuesday night, have a good night, everybody, and make mine
Silverline.
Hi, I'm Greg Horn. Make mine Silverline.
Tube and feel the vibe. Every show you crave right here live. Heroes and villains clash in the night. Madness Comic Network sets it right. Scroll through the list, find what you need. Epic battles and fast-paced speed. From capes to cosmic space delight. Tune in and watch your favorites ignite. On Facebook, share the thrill so grand. On X, the buzz across the land. Madness Comic Network all around. In every episode, joy is found. Uploads, they never end. superheroes and their friends. Catch every twist and every turn. Madness Comic, you will yearn. Stay up to date with every twist. Madness Comic, don't miss a gist. From laughter to tears, every mood. Madness Comic sets the groove. Click that button and subscribe. Catch the wave and ride the tide. Join the fun, join the craze. Madness Comic brightens days. New uploads, they never end. Superheroes and their friends. Catch every twist and every turn. Madness Comic, you will yearn. Stay up to date with every twist. Madness Comic, don't miss a gist. From laughter to tears, every mood. Madness Comic sets the groove. Click that button and subscribe.